Hi. Finance definitely involves a lot of math, but there's also sort of an attitude or a philosophy to doing well personally. Beyond being able to do the formulas and calculate different things, calculate a PE ratio, or find the future value of something, or understand what a discount on a bond is, or whatever it is we're talking about. In order to understand the value, in order to participate in the system, in order to make the best of the system, in order to be successful and have the system work for you, we need to understand what it is, how it's arranged, how it's designed, what the entry period is, what the rules are. There's a lot of words to it too. There's a lot of philosophy. And simply understanding and participating in the system doesn't necessarily mean we agree with it. In fact, there are many things we just have to agree with on a daily basis, which we don't like, right? That's just part of being an adult living life, that we have to accept things that we can't change, or at least try to change them while participating or accepting them or submitting to them, such as the law and the economy, which are these enormous systems with billions of different people participating in all these different interconnected parts. And so here today in this video, I've got my vision board or my mind map that I'm going to go through and kind of give some of that explicit instruction I think students and young people are lacking, especially in the United States, where it's so crucial that they learn something, learn the basic pathways, learn the consequences and the positives and negatives, the ifs and thens of the situation when it comes to living a long life in a highly financialized economy. All right, so I think we need first explicit instruction in schools and at home. There needs to be consistent discussion. It's not just like a parent can sit down at one time and explain everything and then just have the kid, go off and remember everything and understand everything and then buy into the idea that even if he or she can't change the system, doesn't agree with it, thinks it's unfair, wants to change it, that they still have to participate in it and they can get benefits even from something they don't necessarily like. And that even if they feel excluded in some way, they actually can manipulate the rules, manipulate the system such that it can work for them. There are plenty of examples of people who move up in income through demographic categories too. So consistent discussion, not necessarily on a daily basis, but frequently, again, and explaining the nuance and picking at the finer points and getting into the details, right? Finance and law and economics are not all intuitive, so I think that most of the cultural approach to these situations is that, well, we just expect everybody to kind of know everything by walking through their daily life and just intuiting that they would, through a little bit of using money and through a little bit of watching their parents or stuff on television, that they would just kind of magically learn to think responsibly and understand all of the different details of credit and loans and even the law, legal procedure, human rights, civil rights, that they would be able to just kind of infer all of this as if it were coming down from heaven or something, when it's not a science. It's not really being led by objective fact. These are systems that were developed by people, very often cruel people through history, and there's been some evolution, some transition away from large parts of the historical cruelty. But the structures of economics and legal systems are human-centric. They don't hinge, or they don't change, or they don't follow the same path as science, where objective fact or truth is really being sought, and then we could prove that objective fact, and when we reproduce across many scientists the same results, then it would become a consensus in a larger group. We wouldn't see such variance between countries and such difference in opinion with regards to finance and economics and law and things if these were scientific. So we need to understand that intuition isn't going to guide people. We need to discuss things instead of talking about television or food or whatever sort of unimportant stuff. we should try to have more adult discussions because, whilst it's in the social media a lot, equity and fairness and things, this and even reality is not really a clear objective when it comes to the law and economics. It's more of a skewed reality or a partial reality. It's not quite religion, it's not quite philosophy, it's not quite morality, it's definitely not quite science. There are parts and pieces of all these different systems that form the basis of our law and economics, and the two are sort of one, they support each other. We can't have an economic system without a legal system. And so, in a way, I think it's sort of this, like Frankenstein's monster, this assemblage of different parts and pieces of all of these parts of the human mind and culture that have been lumped together and now kind of dominate all of us in an inhuman way, right? So when I say Frankenstein's monster, I'm not really exaggerating. In a lot of cases, in so many cases, the legal and economic system are so far detached from reality and science and fairness, so inconsistent with other human parts of our existence, that it's like people, it seems almost intentional, it does. Although it is kind of just coincidental through the years in history that it's been designed this way and has come up this way through collective consensus building in Congresses and some minor scientific additions in economics and in universities and things. There's been some scientific tweaking, but it's almost like it was intentionally designed to be as inhuman and as impossible to understand as it could possibly be made. Like it's purposefully obtuse. I've said that about the legal system, like the tax code, for example. I've said that many times, that it seems intentionally so difficult and complicated that 99 and more % of the people would not be able to navigate it. So it takes a specialized sort of set of skills in order to understand what's going on, which then gives all of the power, most of the power, to those people who have that specialized set of skills, who then make the rules that exclude 99 and more % of the people, who then are subject to the wills and whims, even collective whims over time. That's what laws are. When laws change, they're not scientific. It's not like the law of gravity, which just is. It's not science. They change. They're subject to being amended at any time. And maybe it's 100-year-long whim, maybe it's 1,000-year-long whim, but as soon as that changes, and changes again and again, as we see sometimes, these are the whims of humans. These are the emotions of human beings that are governing aspects of our lives that are so crucial, such that they affect whether we can eat, whether we can have a house, whether we can have clothes. Our very basic needs on Maslow's hierarchy, let alone those higher order needs like self-actualization, career, these types of things. And so parents, teachers, and other interested stakeholders, friends, family members, need to understand, in my opinion anyway, and I think this is the only solution I have to solving these problems, that people will be more engaged in their community, more engaged in their social reality, more engaged in their political reality, and be also more logical and rational about it, which I'll get to at the end of my little vision board here. We need to talk about facts and what's controllable, what can we control, what can't we control, what do we have to deal with that we don't like, why don't we like it, how can we maybe change it, how can we also live with it in the meantime, without having negative consequences like jail, bankruptcy, foreclosure, delinquency, and even just social or community ostracization, being fired from work, all these different things. Sure, I think democracy is important, and we should have the ability to change, and ideally, if we were an open book, we could just write, all of our systems again from scratch. Hey, a lot would be different. Absolutely, but that's just not likely, because there's entrenched power systems that try, as people have for thousands of years, really haven't gone away. So it's never too soon to learn about these things. So from a young age, I recommend treating children like adults in a way, and to speak to them and cut out the baby talk, speak to them in a way that is going to help them develop those language skills, and that they would hear it such that their brain would start developing pathways for these more complex, nuanced, and critical ideas that they're going to use for all of their life, rather than doing the baby talk and the video games and the placating for 12 years or 15 years or whatever, then just kicking them out and setting them free out to, fend for themselves. So it's never too soon, but it could be too late, right? That's what I think. In society, there's rent-seeking behavior, people who are not adding value to the system. Whether in the feudal period in Old World, they had the land and they had serfs and slaves and things, and they're exploiting people and the land and the resources, that's where the term rent-seeking came from, where people of the lower classes had virtually no rights. Or today, when if you live in a city, you don't have any bargaining power. I mean, the Porter's Five Forces model for business includes the bargaining power of suppliers and consumers, but consumers rarely have any bargaining power in the market when it comes to goods as far as the price goes, and certainly not when it comes to rent and land, because it is a limited quantity and there are all sorts of different forces that have led to the skyrocketing prices. But rent and wage is a ratio that people have begun to talk about a bit, but it's something that's been out of control for quite some time, right? And so just like the workers are suppliers, they don't necessarily have bargaining power to go to their employer and say, I want a higher wage. As consumers of rent or consumers of property and housing, they don't have any bargaining power. So the Five Forces model is kind of fishy, if you ask me, except for businesses. In the United States, I think we have an excessive focus on business, whereas even in Europe, they have more of a focus on the consumer. I think that's something that should change, but government intervention is unlikely, or it's probably going to be too late. For whatever reason, whether it's Reagan saying government is the problem, and I tend to agree in part, but it's not like we're getting rid of government. I mean, obviously the way that government interacts with its citizens is problematic. Again, back to that Frankenstein's monster, the criminal justice system, the way the laws allow companies to be predatory lenders and then predatory creditors, and the way that the credit system is structured, that people could more or less, to no fault of their own, find themselves delinquent and in very bad credit situation, then largely excluded from employment, housing, and other parts of basic life. I don't think the government is going to intervene, although it should. So in that way, the government is the problem. But there are a lot of reasons why we could go on for hours about why the government isn't likely to make a meaningful intervention, or if it does, it'll be too late. Certainly, it won't be retroactive. And so it might help young people coming up, but it won't help older people who have already gotten into their situation. It's not going to be retroactive. It's not going to go back and change things. Right? Most people are living check to check because there is just such an extreme condition out there that they're not making enough. They're paying too much in rent. They're paying so much for goods and services. Sometimes their frivolous purchases are part of why they don't have enough money. Avocado toast was, of course, a great trope about young people, even though avocados aren't very expensive and toast is pretty cheap last I checked. And certainly avocado toast isn't going to put them in debt $100,000 like they might see with college, as much as a house would have cost before, so that's kind of odd. But most people are living check to check, and so they can't really save for retirement. Only half of Americans have any retirement, right? And then 2 out of 5, almost 40%, don't even have $500 that they could use if the car broke down or if they had a medical expense or something like that. And I think hence that's why we have Social Security and Medicare at the beginning, Medicare and Medicaid. Back in the 30s, when it was developed under the New Deal, 30s and 40s, coming out of the Depression, it was intended to help older people who just didn't have an income in their years, didn't have any retirement savings. And again, they don't have retirement savings because they didn't have enough income. You need income to have retirement savings, and this is the luxury that the top 10, 15, 20 so percent have, that they can invest in these exotic instruments, and they can get great interest rates, so they can have that $1 million gold standard retirement, but this is just not available for most people, as so again, hence Social Security and Medicare. The reason, again, that people don't have any of this saved is because it's not because they didn't work hard, it's not because they're spending too much in every case, in some cases, yes, but it's after a certain period of time, after a critical period, after a critical age period, they just can't get back into that and on that path, right? If they don't follow exactly the right path and exactly the right years, I think that's like age 15 to 24, late high school through what would be undergraduate, and maybe a master's degree if you want to do really well financially. If you don't do exactly the right thing or pretty close to the right thing in those years, you'll find yourself with kids, bills coming out your ears, and you'll be completely unable to go back to school or to correct your situation. That's what I call the critical period, and this is a term that people use for language acquisition for very young children. There's this critical period. If language acquisition for a second language doesn't start in that period, then learners often have more trouble with phonemes and phonics and things. I think there's a critical period for finance where if people don't be responsible in their academic pursuits in that late high school to undergraduate and ideally master's degree or graduate degree period, then they will almost never get back on track because they'll find themselves again in the adult world where people don't have the sympathy or the system isn't designed to provide a support network that can give a person daycare while they go back to college, or if they start college and fail out or drop out or something, they've got now more debt, they won't be eligible to take out as many student loans to go back and finish their college. There are just too many responsibilities once people get out of that period that they don't get back onto that track towards financial, the ideal financial success level. And they're almost guaranteed hardships if they miss out in that year in those years where they're really not thinking clearly, their brains aren't fully developed, and they're mostly just doing what they see or what they intuit from the world around them, what they're explicitly taught from their parents. And so this is where we get transgenerational poverty and even just struggling middle class lifestyles from generation to generation. If the parents if the schools aren't preparing these kids or convincing them, persuading them somehow to do these things in these years, then they're setting them up for a lifetime of difficulties. And left up to their own devices, students and young kids are often just going to play on social media, play video games, do anything but go to school and do their homework and be diligent because that's nerdy, that's not cool. There's social ostracization, and then I guess it's boring. And this is where later on in a moment I'll talk about we need to adjust our perceptions of what boring and happiness are. That hard work isn't necessarily a bad thing, and hard mental work might even be more difficult to rationalize than hard physical work because people don't seem to have much of a problem going to work at age 18 and doing sort of backbreaking labor or being on their feet all day long, doing things that are physically demanding. But doing things that are similarly mentally demanding, people seem to be really turned off by. But those mentally demanding jobs in the STEM field, the most mentally demanding jobs are the ones that pay the highest and give people the highest capacity and ability to directly affect their own lives and those around them, and even then larger community if they do very well. So really it takes early planning from that critical period. We have to start ideally in a young age group, but at least in the high school age, of at least understanding the basics. That if I do well in the set of courses that has been set before me, and if I kind of follow the instructions and the advice that the adults are giving, even if I don't like those adults, even if maybe I'm interested in something else, if I just follow what they're saying, then if I can trust them enough, then I might be able to have a better life, financially speaking. And in adult life, finances are really crucial. The number one cause of failed marriages is about money, right? So It's going to impact love life. It's going to impact people's ability to travel and experience different things in life. It's going to impact people's ability, their happiness level. I mean, there are studies that say that people who win the lottery aren't any happier than they were before they won the lottery. But I don't know if that's entirely believable. It seems like if I had a choice of $1 million or not, I would be happier somehow, anyway, with $1 million. But that's just me. True, you can't make people, you can't take away some of the psychological issues that people have. But money is definitely going to help you feel better about yourself and the world around you. Or at least it's going to alleviate stress, which will reduce cortisol and will have positive effects. Stress about money is probably the #1 stressor, pre-COVID and post-COVID, I suppose. Right, so in that planning, we need to wonder about why do we need to do these things, right? And in order to really convince somebody, they have questions, you know, what is rich, what is poor, what is middle class? You know, why should I want to do better than my parents? Why should I want to leave my neighborhood? How can I do that? How can I do this impossible math problem if I've never been good at math? How can I get a good job if I don't like these things, right? Who is a good person that I can look to, who's maybe a role model, or what will happen if I do something or if I don't do something? What won't happen if I do this or don't do that, right? How much time will it take for me to succeed in this? How much, after my commitment at university, how much time will it take for me to pay back the debt, if I choose to do that? Right, so asking and answering questions pertaining to one's own life and then helping others try to just investigate and explore these ideas is really crucial. I mean, while we're exploring our, from sexuality to media preferences and all sorts of different food and dietary preferences, it seems like one of the real crucial things that we should also explore, not to say those things are not important, but we should also explore what we're going to do with our lives, how we're going to get the money that's going to sustain our life, how we're going to, what we're going to do for work, which will give our life some sense of purpose, or it's going to be where we spend most of our time anyway. So these are important things to figure out in one's own personal life. Right? So simple actions from a daily level and consistently through younger years can alleviate lifetime for an individual and then generations of poverty or struggle. And again, education is the key, but it's really redundant, or it might seem repetitive, but that goes back to the critical period where if people find themselves off course in those early years, it's almost guaranteed that they're not going to get back on track. It's not impossible, but it's very rare. And it takes a lot more effort. It's a different process to get a GED, to go back to university after 10 years out of school. I mean, one plus point is after some time off, they might look at what's going to give the return on investment. But education is probably the only way that people are going to collectively, individually, significantly rise themselves in class. And that's where the United States offers still a lot of opportunity, but people have to follow those basic guidelines and buy into the idea that even if they don't like the content, that it's for a purpose and it's going to benefit them later. They have to be a little bit selfish, in other words, to think about their own lives in terms of finance. And yes, that's going to set them apart from their friends sometimes, or their family other times, but then they can come back and benefit those same people later if they have higher incomes, or if they learn something, they can share their knowledge. Right? So, importantly though, not all educations are created equal. They're not all equally suited to change the potential into kinetic. Not all educations are the same. Some people would say, follow your passion. I think that's more of a 20th century phenomenon. Whereas if you had a college degree in 1970s, you were a lot better off than if you have a college degree today. Let's just say that much. right? So one of the reasons you need to think about not all educations are equally suited to produce those results is you're going to have debt. Almost all of us will have debt. People who are watching this who aren't going to have college debt aren't watching this. They don't need this type of instruction or tutelage or whatever, right? Most of us are going to take out some college debt, and that's probably going to be federal loans or something. And this is part of where the United States again stands out, that college is extremely expensive, and it stands out in terms of price, but there's also a means to subsidize or to pay for that. And of course, it's not convenient. Nobody likes paying their student debt. And sure do wish the government would offer tuition-free undergraduate and things, but while that's not happening, the education is still very important. And so rather than worrying about the cost, while people don't worry about going $300,000 into debt for a house, I can't personally imagine, although it's part of the American dream, but I remarked to many people that I can't imagine being one of the people who is just happy as can be to be $400,000 in debt and then tied to a job for their house such that they can't move. But whatever, priorities are different for everybody, right? Maybe I'll understand that later in life. But as far as college debt goes, you're going to have problems with it or without it. So you might as well get the asset to then finance a lifestyle that's going to give you more advantage, more opportunities than if you don't go to college. Certainly if you go to college and get a highly sought after degree, a degree where there's sort of critical need, then you're in a much better position and you pay off that debt pretty quickly. Just like people pay off houses and cars, people pay off college. It's not a tangible debt. You can't sell the education, whereas you can sell a car or a house. And that's one of the problems that people have been talking about in terms of cancellation of that student debt. But until that time when student debt is canceled, this is the best way to finance a future still. And again, Americans are uniquely situated for either rise or fall on this point. That said, there's a lot of opportunity available by getting a high school diploma and having a decent GPA, but you don't need a fantastic GPA. If you don't, you can still go to community college and take courses, buckle down after high school. It's almost never too late in that critical period. After the critical period, a lot of times, or usually, it's too late, unfortunately. It's not necessarily true in all cases. Got to make clear of that. But once you go to college, you got to choose your major wisely. Again, all in the pursuit of financial happiness and less stress in the number one area that causes stress, income and assets and just ability to pay your bills. While almost everybody, or more than half anyway, is working check to check with no retirement savings, don't even have $500 to their name, obviously alienated from politics and even from each other, those who choose their major wisely are in a much different position. And they can extend those benefits, that knowledge, to their children and dramatically change the course of their family and then community life within a matter of decades. Right, so a quick couple of numbers for 22 to 27-year-olds, those who would have just graduated from college or those who have been working for about 4 years after high school. The average earning is $44,000, or roughly thereabouts, for people with a college degree versus $30,000 with a high school diploma only. And that's after 4 years of working if you have only a high school diploma. Over a lifetime, the average difference, this is widely quoted, the average difference between somebody with only a bachelor's degree and somebody with only a high school diploma is $1 million. If only you get a bachelor's degree, and particularly in a STEM field, then you make $1 million or more than you would have if you didn't go to college. So while there are a lot of reasons that people don't go to college, and I suppose not everybody is suited, some people have limitations, but the vast majority of us are not limited such that we couldn't, through our own hard work and diligence, remove distractors and focus intently on some subject. And I can't stress enough how much I recommend science, technology, engineering, and math, because those pay off far more than other degrees, where not all degrees are created equal. I can't stress that it's possible if only we convince ourselves that we can. If we say we can, then we can manifest destiny and we can make our own futures, but we have to believe in ourselves, right? Believe that we can do and can learn the math. If we didn't learn it in elementary school, we can learn it later. If we didn't do well in high school, we can always do it better later. It's never too late. While the brain is fresh and being renewed and young in that critical period, the neurons and synapses can be reconfigured such that what we weren't good at 5 years ago, we can become good at now, but after some years' time off, if you don't use it, you lose it, and even your brain will start to generally, not in every case, but generally start to kind of degrade and be not as open to new experiences. So while you're young, you can relearn. You can unlearn some things, you can relearn things, you can learn things for the first time, and it's a lot easier than if you're old. We can make informed decisions, right? With this stick-to-itiveness, with this vision of a future, with this clear understanding that life is long and that there is a future, that all of life is not in the moment. It's not just about today. We have to plan for the future. We have memories about the past. Why not think more about the future so that we can look back on the future's past and have happy memories or happier memories and be satisfied with the choices we made? We can make informed decisions and stick to the facts. The facts, like STEM subjects, are a much better avenue if you are at all possible, or if you are at all capable of justifying the work it's going to take to go into those fields, right? And that's going to mean you can't go partying in college. You're not going to have the same types of friends. You can do that later if that's what you really want to do. There's always time for goofing off. Right? But we need explicit guidance in order to make those informed decisions, and that starts with parents and teachers and people at home. And then after a while, with the little kernel, the mustard seed of hope and the little germ of an idea, people can become their own teachers. Especially with the online technologies we have today, we can all go onto YouTube or whatever and find tutorials and find plenty of people talking about whatever, but we need to search and be specific in our approach to these things, and we need to have that little bit of knowledge that's going to help us seek out that type of information and advice that's going to lead to specific results. Right? So maybe you're scared, maybe people are scared of $50,000, $100,000 in debt, paying it off for 20 years maybe, and yeah, it can be quite frustrating at times. It might not be an advantage, but it definitely can be an asset. And so again, maybe don't follow your passion for your work. If you love art, chances of you being a famous artist are pretty low. Chances of you making a lot of money or even a middle-class living is pretty low. So maybe do art on the side. I like art. But as far as work goes, as far as investing a lot of money to go to a school to learn art, I just can't recommend it in most cases. Again, back to STEM. Get the return on your investment. Get the skills you'll need to be highly competitive in a highly competitive capital market and financialized economy. Right? You have other time that you can develop your skills, or maybe you can fuse the two into one. For every Beeple there is out there, there's 100 and more people who make nothing on their art. Certainly the quality that I think Beeple's art is. But remember, people work to get money. That's the main thing. I'm not at work because I love it. People don't go to work, get up early in the morning with an alarm and race through traffic and sit at a desk all day, come home at night, basically spend a few minutes with the kids and the wife or whatever on the couch and then go to sleep to wake up the next day to do it all over again 5 days a week for their entire adult life because it's fun. That's a rarity. People go to work for money. And so since you're going to be spending almost all your years at work and most of your days at work, then the least you could do for yourself is to get into a line of work that's going to give you the option on the weekend to do something fun. When you go home, to have something, right? To have at least the freedom from bill collectors, at least that much. To have the ability to have children and not stress out about finances. To have the ability to get married and not have the financial situation end your marriage, right? To have the ability to pass on wealth to the next generation. You can do that if you just remember that people go to work to make money. That is the reason we work. Sure, we contribute to society, and sure, we add value, and we're progressing and evolving our civilization, and there are all these other intangible benefits, and work gives us a sense of purpose, of course, even when we don't like it. But if we didn't get paid, we wouldn't go nearly as much. That's pretty well guaranteed. So success itself and other professional culture can be fun. So maybe you think math is not fun, or engineering is boring, or computer programming isn't your thing, and maybe you think visual arts or music or philosophy is your thing. Well, you're not going to get paid anything to stand on a corner and talk about philosophy. You want to be a writer, a journalist? Maybe blog on the weekends. That's my advice, since half of all journalistic jobs and more have disappeared in the last 10 years. If you can find a niche in an office, even working, bouncing between different jobs, you can have fun at work in your being successful, in getting the rewards that one gets from quality work and from building connections with other people, from that contributing to society and having a sense of purpose. You can have fun as an adult. It doesn't have to be celebrity status type of stuff. You don't have to be a professional athlete to have fun at work. You just have to adjust what you think is fun. And people can change their minds. It might be difficult. It might require some effort. It might seem like it's a put on for a minute. It might seem like it's contrived for a minute. But people can change their minds, especially young people. It is possible. So to maximize your power, you're going to need to consciously, logically, rationally think through the most important decisions you'll ever make in life. And that starts with explicit instruction, consistent discussion, frequent updates, and explanations for young people who are not otherwise tuned into all of the specifics of the adult world, but should be, regardless. So in order to get agency, we need some kernel of knowledge, and then to take advantage of the opportunity we have to know that it's an opportunity and not just a hoax. We have to know that it's not that all of the odds aren't against us in the way that some people out there would have us believe, that everything is rigged and that even if you try, you're never going to get anything, and that some mysterious, invisible hand is never going to let you succeed. Not true. There are plenty of cases that show that's not quite true. If you take the initiative, especially in the critical period at school, and learn specific skills, you are nearly guaranteed to have a pretty decent life. And that's financial literacy in itself. Right? So if you take agency early, using what you have, i.e. public education, which might not always be great surroundings and environments, teachers might not always be the most qualified, the technology might be outdated, the classrooms either drafty or stuffy, boring certainly, probably a lot of harassment, verbally and otherwise going on. But if you can focus on what you're there to do, which is learn something from those boring books, whatever, and you can go home, take your work home with you in those younger years and rationalize not going on the phone, playing video games, partying, right? If you can do what you need to do now so that you can do what you want to do later, you're going to be in a much better position, right? And again, I recognize that not everybody is in a position when they're young to do this. And so there are pathways still to get back on track. It's just very difficult. So to the extent possible, I strongly, strongly urge young people to stick to the path, to just follow rules to the extent possible. You know, if you want to be revolutionary and rebellious, and if you really hate the system and the world you live in, and of course public education is going to be X, Y, and Z negative things, and we can form negative opinions and dislike things while still dealing with them. We can be civil with each other while having different opinions. We can go to school or even work. I mean, it's clear that people go to work and hate it for their entire life. We can go to school and do the work, take the work home, rationalizing that what we do today is what we have to do in order to do what we want later. If you want to goof off, there is free time to do so, but if at all possible, we can rationalize when we're young to do the work, to take the work home, to work through math and science problems in particular, and to convince ourselves, to change our own minds based on the idea that doing this stuff that's just awful today is going to give us longer-term advantages, just like going to the gym hurts in the present tense, but it produces results later. Just like running a marathon is a terribly painful experience, but it produces positive feelings, right, of accomplishment and even just physical sensation afterwards. Doing the homework and going to school, being diligent in studies has some painful feeling in the short term, or some discomfort, but it's going to lead to better things later on in life. And so you can still be subversive and get A's on tests. You can infiltrate and perpetrate. You can stand in while standing out. You know, you can still be a rebel. Like Richard Branson is a rebel billionaire. I'm not a huge fan of his, but they call him a rebel billionaire because he's different from others, right? You can be, like Elon Musk is really quite different from others. There are examples of people, these are only just a couple who are frequently in the media. There are examples of people in every school, certainly at universities, who strongly dislike the system and the structure of what's going on, that normal people, the middle class is being squeezed, that wages aren't rising, that there's inequality and unfairness and injustice, and there are all these crimes against people who haven't done anything wrong, right? There are people who dislike the system yet still manage to function within it because they have a sense that A, they're not doing themselves any favors if they just go against the grain so much that they remove their own ability to pay for their food, water, shelter, clothing, you know, and provide themselves with a decent lifestyle to reduce their financial stress. And that B, they won't have any direct impact if they just quit the system and, you know, through this illusion of pop culture, maybe think that they're going to somehow dismantle everything and write a new book and create some new system that's just going to be accepted at a flash, and that, you know, all of the power systems and structures are just going to crumble before the truth. No, that's not really how it works. That's not finance, law, and economics. They're not that. It's again, Frankenstein's monster. And so the best we can do is kind of make it into a mockery, you know, like make fun of it while understanding it. You know, if we don't understand, if we don't know our enemy, basically, then we can't defeat them. So perhaps take Frankenstein's monster, this odd assemblage of all these really sort of inhuman parts that function together for a certain group of people, make that into Theseus's ship, which, you know, over the years, each part of the ship was replaced by something else, such that in the end, it was no longer the same ship, but it's still Theseus' ship. Each board, each plank, each mast, each part was, over the amount of time, replaced, right? We can replace different parts over time, but it's going to take a long, long time to do so. And in order to have that impact, we have to gain some credibility with people who are entrenched in their power. And even after all of our individual and subcultural efforts, we got to understand that the long game is very, very long. And so let's have a little bit of short game too, short and medium game. thinking about ourselves rather than just the collective, and thinking about others. And by thinking about ourselves, we'll be in a better position to help others. All right, so again, stay focused. Bear in mind that not everything in life is going to be pretty and happy and feel good, and that that's not necessarily a bad thing. That by facing adversity, by doing stuff we don't like sometimes, we can actually have advantages and benefits on the other end. Okay? Thank you.